Hello, welcome to Latinoware. My talk today is called Latinoware, What You Need to Know. My name is John Maddog Hall. I'm the board chair of the Linux Professional Institute and the president of Linux International. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, who am I? Well, I've been in the industry for about 50 years. I've worked in a wide variety of different systems for a wide variety of different companies and had a very wide variety of different jobs. But one of the things I am proudest of is what I call being pragmatic. In other words, trying to get the job done. And I happen to think that free and open source technologies are the way to do that. Why are you here? Well, hopefully you're here to learn. You're going to learn about open technologies. You're going to learn why those open technologies are important. You're going to learn how to get started with open technologies and what is the future of them and what is your future. Hopefully, too, you're here to share. You're here to share your own knowledge and your own skills with other people. As you gain more knowledge and skills, you share those with people too. First of all, we have to start by explaining what closed technologies are. Closed technologies are best represented in binary-only software, where you learn how to use the software, but you really don't know how they work. You can't change the software to meet your needs. You can't fix the software if they break because you don't have the source code that goes into making the software. And sooner or later, they will stop working. Maybe when the company goes out of business or the company loses interest in updating the software, you don't have any control over that because the software actually belongs to the company who made it, and you only have a license to use it. Open technologies, on the other hand, give you the source code and give you the information you need to fix or change the technologies. Open source is a good technology for developers because the developers now have a huge pool of software that they can use in forming their own products. However, not all open source passes along that source code to the end users. That's where free software comes in. Free software covered by licenses like the GPL is good for developers and end users. Open hardware allows people to create better hardware by building on the hardware that came before. They see how the hardware worked and they make changes to it to create new hardware, which hopefully itself is open. Open culture, best represented by Creative Commons, is openness in data, openness in text, openness in images, music, and things like that. It's a series of different licenses which can be offered to the end user so that they can use the culture that is given to them, maybe change it, maybe make it better, and pass that on to other people also. But in every case, you have control over the software or the culture or the technology through the different licenses that are available. Now, why is this important? For many years, I used to go around selling computers or selling software. But then one day I realized that nobody really buys a computer. They don't really buy software. They don't put it up on the wall with a candle on either side, like a shrine to say, oh, look at this beautiful computer. Well, maybe if they were Steve Wozniak, they would do that. It was the Apple One. But typically people buy solutions. They have a problem that they need to solve and they want to solve that problem and they buy a computer and software to solve it. Let's say it's a game. Well, you could play a game like Monopoly with a board game, cardboard and cards and things like that. But a lot of times computers are used to solve that game. The problem that you're trying to solve is you want to play the game. And the computer and the software allow you to do that. So people buy solutions. And where that solution is controlling the traffic in a city, whether it's controlling the airplanes flying around in the sky or elevators going up and down in a building, or controlling the electric grid and making sure that the proper amount of electricity gets to you so that you can run your house or run your business. But what if all of that came to an end? What if an atomic attack hit Redmond, Washington, and completely wiped out the Microsoft group of engineers who could build Microsoft products? Now, of course, we hope this never happens, but the thing is, it could. And what would happen to countries like Brazil or, the east coast of the United States or England if this did happen? How long would it take for, even if they had the source code stored someplace safe, to come up with the engineers who are knowledgeable enough in that source code, in that product, to be able to duplicate it again? And it doesn't have to be a nuclear war. It could just be a major conventional war that destroys the manufacturing facilities of some closed source product. And therefore, the customers are without fixes. So the customers are without the ability to use that software in the future. It could be a pandemic, and it could like COVID-19. No, that's ridiculous. That would never happen. But it's possible that pandemic could hit a company and take out most of the people in the company. Or like an embargo. You may have heard of this country. It's called Cuba. And for 60 years, the United States has an embargo against Cuba that says Cuba can't really use any of the software and hardware that comes from the United States or companies in the United States. Now, of course, Cuba does that. They go to other countries, they buy the hardware and software that's necessary to run their country, but they can't really go directly to a United States company and say, hey, can you help us do this? Can you help us fix this problem? Can you make this change? Venezuela and Iran are in the same boat. And it pains me to say this, but you really can't trust a country, even like my own, because sometimes you may get a president in there who refuses to, or enacts an additional embargo, or refuses to let these countries use this software and hardware. You also have to think about the security of your data. Knowing how your hardware and software goes and how it works. Are there trapdoors inside of your data? Is there something which is going to give out your information to somebody you don't want to have it? Now, there have been cases where the NSA has been going through and spying on people. So you need to know what's in your hardware and software and how it works and where the data is going, and also to be able to protect it against, people trying to break in and steal your information. People often ask me, what is the difference between closed source software and open source software? Because if you have closed source software, people can't see how it works, and therefore it must be safer. Or, open source software, you can look in, see the source code, and say, oh yeah, there's a hole. I can exploit that. But the thing is, it's not whether the software is without a problem. All software has holes and things that you can exploit. It's whether once you've found that exploit, how fast can you fix it? Let's say you found a problem, you're using Windows
Lá em
XP.
2016, eu comecei fazendo um curso de programação do Gustavo Guanabara no YouTube, que foi o de lógica de programação. Tudo começa com a lógica de programação.
And all of a sudden, somebody finds an exploit they've never found before, and they're going to use it. How do you fix it? How do you get that patch? What, Microsoft won't give you that patch. And so you're stuck. With free software, you could hire somebody, you have the source code for your product, you could hire somebody to fix that problem and get you back online again. And finally, who do you really trust? Do you really trust the software that comes from some country that's outside of your borders? A company that is under the laws of that country. So, I trust Microsoft, I trust Apple. But if the United States government went to these companies with a court order and said, you need to put a hole, you need to put a trapdoor in that software, they could either do that or they could go to jail. And that's a problem. You want to have your software and your hardware created in your own country as much as possible, because hopefully, you trust the people in your country. And it's under your laws that you have effect on. We can also talk about economic security of a country. Why are you send billions of reais and pesos out of your country for software that could be pulled down off the net for free and tailored by your programmers, your people, into what you need? Or why should you pay for hardware from different countries that could be manufactured in your country? And create solutions that meet your needs exactly. Think about how many people in your country could be employed in doing this and how much you could pay them. These would be good, high-paying, high-technical jobs. And the money that you pay them stays inside of your economy. It helps you buy local food, local housing, and pay local taxes. And that money now comes back into perhaps more need for software and hardware. So it keeps cycling inside of the economy. But once it leaves that economy, it's very hard to get it back. You also build local expertise to produce better products locally. And as you build this expertise, these people will produce new products that can be made in your country and perhaps exported to other countries. So I talk about coopetition. It's a word made up of cooperative competition. People who are making this software all over the world as free software and pooling it together, hundreds of thousands of applications in every field, over 26 million developers worldwide. You should be teaching this in your school, how to use the software, how to create this software, how to manage the software, how to make money from this software. You should be demanding that your government uses this software, both for security aspects and for the economic benefits. When the government pays for software, that software should be available to you, the taxpayer. You paid for that software, your taxes. It should be open to your use. Do not be afraid to ask questions about free software if you don't know anything about it. You're in a perfect place to learn about it. Latinoware. It is okay to be a newbie. We were all newbies once, even myself. In a lot of ways, I'm still a newbie in lots of areas. I'm never going to be finished learning. I know that. So, but on the other hand, try to find the answers yourself. Don't just ask a question without at least looking for it. We have a saying in the free software community, RTFM, read the freaking manual. The F is actually much worse than that, but freaking is okay. That is now completed with search the internet. Look for the answer there first. And if you've done a good job of trying to search the internet, probably you found it. And if not, then you can ask your question. Books are still good. Go to the libraries, go to newsstands, look for books on the subject. But searching the internet these days is the easiest way of finding something. Before you ask the question of me, Maddog, what distribution do you use? I can't tell you the best distribution to use because that's what you're really asking. You're asking me, what is the best distribution for me? I do not know you well enough to be able to tell you what that distribution is. I don't know the type of hardware you have. I don't know what you want to do with it. There are several good distributions to start with on the internet. Search the internet and look for them. But there's other ways of getting started. Maybe you're a high school student or university student, and maybe they have a computer club in your school. You can go to the computer club and say, do you guys use free software? If you do, what distribution of the software do you have? Can you help me get started with it? And maybe they will. If there isn't any computer club, think about starting one. I actually started the Drexel University Computer Club over 50 years ago. I didn't have all the answers, the technical answers, but The leader of a club doesn't necessarily need to be the best technician. They need to be able to get together and generate meetings and pull in speakers and things. They're good organizers. But the computer club will pull in the people who are good technical people to help everybody. Go to your local computer store and ask them if there's any local computer groups or clubs that you can join in the area. Look in magazines, and magazine stands for beginning magazines on free software. And again, search the internet. There are many major distributions out there. You've heard their names, Ubuntu and Debian and Mint and all these different distributions. Many of them, Red Hat, many of them have beginner's guides on their website that step you through step by step onto how to install them. And they've put a lot of time and effort into those beginner's guides. And they're up to date with their particular distribution. They are more likely to be used in your geographical area as being a major distribution. There are minor ones that could be used in different places in the world, but the major ones are most likely used in your area. You can take a look at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. The Raspberry Pi is a tiny little computer. It's relatively cheap. It has lots of beginning documentation on time, how to install it, how to use it, projects you can do with it. It's a good place to go. Remember that GNU Linux runs everywhere. We started with GNU Linux, putting it on old computers to reuse them when they were too slow to run new Windows systems, or Microsoft dropped support for those pieces of hardware. We put GNU Linux on those and made those computers useful again. Today, you probably want something that's a Pentium system or newer, and preferably 64-bit rather than 32-bit. Now, don't put your software on the oldest computer you can find and then complain that it's slow. Or put it on this computer that has the least amount of main memory and say, oh, it's so slow. I mean, don't shoot the piano player, okay? But, you know, you can reuse a lot of old equipment and people say, hey, it has a new life. You can also install GNU Linux on a virtual machine like VMware and run it inside of your Windows system. Actually, in most cases, it's better to install Linux on your laptop and then create a virtual machine and run Windows on top of that, but it's up to you. You can make your existing system dual boot, either to boot off of a separate disk or boot off of a separate partition on your one disk on your system. You can move Microsoft Windows aside and install Linux in the free space. You can also use live systems, either a live DVD or a live USB flash, and put GNU Linux on that, boot the system, run it out of memory and off of the DVD or the flash, and not touch your hard disk at all. So there's many ways you can get used to GNU Linux running on your systems without moving your Windows system aside. GNU Linux does almost everything. I say almost because it's not perfect, but it does run on over 60% of all the servers in the world, particularly if you're doing It runs on more than half of all the smartphones in the world. At the basis of Android is the Linux kernel. And Android is made up of a series of libraries and things above that, but it's still a free software kernel. And about 10% of all the new desktop laptops and Chromebooks and netbooks that are being installed are running GNU Linux. Free and open source software, however, is not just GNU Linux. There's other software called the Berkeley Software Distribution, or else BSD. And that includes 3 different distributions called FreeBSD, OpenBSD, and NetBSD. These are used in different places. People like it for different reasons. That's fine. It's still free software. There's many, many different languages and databases and developers' tools that run on different pieces of hardware, not just Intel and AMD, but also ARM and PowerPC and Motorola, and a new architecture coming out called RISC-V. All of these run GNU Linux, and a lot of them run BSD. The Creative Commons license gives you control about what you create, or you're as an artist or a writer. It allows you to freely license your stuff that you want to do, which makes it easier on end users who would like to use a portion or a little bit of what you create in order for them to be creative also. You have control over how you license it, and you have control over what you create. And you can make money with free and open source software and hardware and data. You can do that because you have control. You can create the solution, and you can control your future with free software. And with that, I'll be happy to ask questions or answer questions, and submit your questions. Thank you.
Hey, Maddog. Good to see you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, while our audience warms up, I have some questions for you. I'll read them in Portuguese, and I'll translate them immediately into English. Is that fine?
Sure, that's fine.
Ok. So, em português first. Tu tá no Latinoware desde a primeira edição. E eu queria te perguntar por que no Brasil a gente ainda não tem uma Microsoft, ou mesmo uma Canonical, ou uma Red Hat, ou uma SUSE. Aonde nós, brasileiros, latino-americanos, estamos errando? Now in English. You have been participating in Latinoware since the first edition. And I would like to ask you, why do you think that here in Brazil, we never had a Microsoft or even a Canonical or Red Hat or SUSE? We actually had a Conectiva Linux, and it doesn't exist anymore. What do you think that is missing for our Brazilians, Latin Americans, in order for us to get this kind of things? Where are you failing?
Well, first of all, you've had some innovation in Brazil and Latin America. There was a distribution, as you mentioned, Conectiva, but there was also.
Yeah, one second. Sim, vocês tiveram uma série de inovações na América Latina. Aconteceu, de fato, a distribuição conectiva, como tu mencionaste, mas também. Go ahead.
But you also had one of the first companies to embed Linux to router systems and switches. Unfortunately, I've forgotten the name of them, but perhaps you can remember.
Yes. Nós tivemos aqui no Brasil as primeiras empresas a trabalhar com Linux embarcado. A Cyclades foi uma dessas empresas. Cyclades.
Yes. I think part of the problem is simply a lack of a market to allow these things to create. I know there's a lot of companies that feel it's difficult to do business in Brazil.
Parte da culpa disso é o próprio mercado. Eu conheço uma série de empresas que dizem para mim o quanto que é difícil fazer negócios no Brasil.
However, I know a lot of companies like Core Linux and Opens who have started up and used free software in their business.
Mas, por outro lado, eu conheço uma série de outras empresas, como a For Linux e a OpenS, que estão crescendo, trabalhando com negócios, simplesmente utilizando softwares livres.
I think that you have lots of good universities and things like that. I'm not sure why they haven't developed a Brazilian-centric distribution.
Vocês têm uma série de boas universidades aí, e eu realmente não sei dizer exatamente por que vocês não têm um negócio com uma distribuição Linux.
On the other hand, a lot of the country-centric distributions have been shrinking because the major distributions now cover multiple languages.
Também é importante observar que muitas das distribuições específicas dos vários países acabaram diminuindo porque as distribuições grandes acabaram embarcando o suporte a vários idiomas.
And rather than support 100 different country-specific distributions, I think it's better to have 2 or 3 distributions to support 100 languages.
E eu acho que em vez de ter 100 distribuições, uma para cada linguagem diferente, o melhor é ter 3 ou 4 distribuições que suportem as 100 linguagens diferentes.
The real thing is to collaborate on the vast bulk of the software all over the world and then tailor it specifically to your needs in the country that you're in.
O que faz mais sentido é que as pessoas colaborem nessas distribuições e que de vários países façam as customizações necessárias para que tenham exatamente aquilo que precisam.
The money that you would spend on licenses going to the United States or going to England would instead be paid to local programmers inside of Brazil and the rest of Latin America.
E assim, dessa forma, em vez de simplesmente pegar e enviar o dinheiro para esse trabalho de customização ou de aquisição de software que é feito a partir de outros países, pode ficar no próprio país para que esse país, então, invista na customização dessas distribuições para que elas sirvam para aquele país.
And because that money was spent locally, it would continue to circulate inside of your country.
E já que esse dinheiro, então, é investido localmente, esse dinheiro também vai ser gasto localmente, e isso vai fazer com que a economia siga adiante.
We will cover more of this concept on Friday.
Nós vamos cobrir mais disso na sexta-feira. Maddog, people here are telling that your audio is leaking. Do you have an earphone?
Yes. Is this better?
I think so. Yes. This is a lot better. Thank you. Okay. Let me see if there is another question here. No, not yet. So, you have mentioned some examples in here, and it seems like we do have some very good brains in Latin America in general. But what we are observing, and especially since the pandemic started, is that a lot of these brains are evading, both physically, like moving into other countries, or working in here to other countries. What should we in Latin America do in order to keep these brains in here? And I'll just wait, because I asked first in English, I'll translate it back to Portuguese. O que eu falei foi que a gente está vendo, então, até pelos exemplos que ele deu, que a gente tem muita gente inteligente aqui e muita gente trabalhando no Brasil, desenvolvendo softwares para o mundo inteiro. E especificamente agora, nessa época de pandemia, muita gente aqui do Brasil arrumou emprego para trabalhar fora e muita gente acabou indo trabalhar fora. Aí minha pergunta para ele foi de que maneira nós conseguimos reter os cérebros aqui no Brasil. Now you can answer.
Well, Brazil is in a very interesting situation because I know that your salary levels are lower for the same types of things that you might receive in the United States.
Bom,
And in addition,
a situação no Brasil é interessante, porque no Brasil acaba se gastando menos para pagar para as pessoas em termos de salário do que para pagar a mesma coisa que as pessoas fariam nos Estados Unidos.
And in addition, you have you're in a good time zone as opposed to places like China or India, so that you can communicate very nicely with the people in the United States.
E a outra questão importante é que a gente está numa região de fuso horário bem interessante, o que torna muito mais fácil para a gente estar se comunicando com pessoas e empresas nos Estados Unidos do que para as pessoas na China ou na Índia, por exemplo.
So call centers, as an example, people in the United States can hire people in Brazil for call centers, and you're in the same time zone, for the most part, as we are.
Então, se a gente for pensar em centrais de atendimento, por exemplo, as empresas nos Estados Unidos, elas podem contratar pessoas no Brasil, porque na maior parte do tempo a gente vai estar dentro do mesmo fuso horário.
Now, one of the things I said in my talk is that we in the free software community have to raise our level of what we're producing.
E uma coisa que eu falo nas minhas palestras e que eu vou falar na minha próxima palestra é que nós que trabalhamos no mundo do software livre, a gente tem que elevar esse nível de produção que a gente tem.
It will be harder and harder to get jobs actually working on operating systems and libraries and things like that and still make a lot of money.
Pode ser difícil, assim, trabalhar em coisas como hardware e bibliotecas e ainda assim fazer bastante dinheiro. Quer dizer, é possível trabalhar nessas coisas e fazer bastante dinheiro.
Open source will be moving up a level where you're working on a solution that takes 99% from open source.
Ao se criar soluções, porém, considerando que a gente vai estar usando software de código aberto, a gente está falando da construção com tudo isso de 99% de uma solução completa.
So you'll either be a company like Red Hat that works completely off of open source, and what you're selling is the concept of service to your customers.
Então, tu pode, assim, ser uma empresa no estilo da Red Hat, que trabalha exclusivamente com software livre, e o que vende para os clientes é esse conceito de assinatura e de suporte.
Or you might become a company like Linksys or Cyclins, whose product, whose solution was a piece of hardware and open source on top of it.
Ou então tu pode se tornar uma empresa tipo a Linksys ou a Cyclades, que tu produz o hardware e tu tem, de fato, uma série de softwares livres que já estão embarcados nessas soluções.
And then on top of that, you put security features, maybe artificial intelligence, to create a high-value product.
Então, em cima disso, tu ainda pode colocar elementos de segurança, de inteligência artificial, o que vai tornar o teu produto um produto de valor muito mais alto.
And then what happens is you get the profits from that high-value product, and that pays you more money.
E ainda assim, a cada coisa que tu colocas de valor em cima é o que vai fazer com que tu ganhes mais dinheiro.
Another thing which I think is very important is to look at the concept of a cooperative type of business.
É um tipo de negócio cooperativo.
Because what happens when you work for a company, you work very hard, but the stockholders and the president are the ones who get a lot of the money.
Que você tem que imaginar que quando você trabalha para uma empresa, de fato, são os donos da empresa e os acionistas que ganham a maior parte do dinheiro.
But when you work in a cooperative, then the people share the profits of the company based upon how hard they work and what their skill level is and things like that.
Mas se tu trabalhas numa cooperativa, aí o que acontece é que o dinheiro é redistribuído entre todos aqueles que contribuem para a solução.
The employees of the company may hire the managers and the things like that in order to produce the products.
Os gestores da cooperativa ainda podem contratar os gestores e administradores e outras coisas necessárias assim, a fim de administrar a produção desse produto.
And the profits that they make go directly into their pockets instead of going to stockholders or people like that spread throughout the world.
Assim, o dinheiro que é feito é distribuído entre todas essas pessoas e não só para um dono ou para acionistas que estão espalhados ao redor do mundo.
We have experienced in the United States a number of companies that, as a capitalistic type of company, have actually gone out of business.
Nós vimos os Estados Unidos empresas que operavam de uma maneira capitalista saindo do mercado.
The employees borrow money to buy the assets of the company from the owners, and then the employees run the company and it becomes more profitable.
E nesses casos que já aconteceram, os empregados dessas companhias que saíram fora do mercado se juntaram para comprar aquilo que a companhia tinha, todos os bens da companhia, e passaram eles mesmos a gerenciar a empresa, e a empresa acabou se tornando mais lucrativa.
Blender, a piece of free software that you can find on Linux that you do graphics with.
Blender, que é um software que existe disponível para o Linux e que tu podes baixar, e ele é usado para produzir vários tipos de gráficos.
Originally was a closed source proprietary product that was very good but very expensive.
Originalmente era um software proprietário que era muito bom, mas era muito caro.
The company did not have enough customers and eventually went out of business.
A empresa não tinha cliente suficiente e eventualmente acabou saindo do mercado.
The customers that did like the product and liked it very much created a non-profit organization to carry the product forward.
Os clientes que utilizavam o produto e realmente gostavam bastante dele, acabaram criando uma fundação para levar o produto adiante.
They came up with innovative ways to make money to pay the developers.
Eles descobriram modos inovativos de pagar os desenvolvedores para manterem o produto.
And by opening up the source code, they were able to make their product much better over time than having it as a closed source product.
E ao abrir o produto deles e oferecer para o mercado de código aberto, eles acabaram expandindo o mercado deles e descobrindo novas maneiras de tornar o produto lucrativo.
And so now Blender is better and more successful than ever.
Agora o Blender é melhor e faz mais sucesso do que nunca fez.
Another product called Project.net.
Produto chamado Project.net.
It is a product that helps you keep track of your development.
Esse é um produto que ajuda você a observar o que está acontecendo com o teu desenvolvimento.
Was closed source, very proprietary, and sold for a lot of money.
Ele era proprietário, bem fechado, e era vendido por uma quantidade muito grande de dinheiro.
They only sold about 4 licenses per every 3 months.
Eles apenas vendiam umas 4 licenças a cada 3 meses.
And 60% of the people that bought the license also bought training and support.
E 60% das pessoas que compravam a licença também adquiriam treinamento e suporte.
So they went out of business, and a friend of mine bought the company.
Então, eles saíram do mercado e um amigo meu comprou a empresa.
He made the project free software, open source.
Tornou o projeto de código livre e aberto.
And 2,000 people every 3 months pulled the software down, not just 4.
2.000 pessoas agora, a cada 3 meses, baixam o software e não apenas 4.
But 60% of them bought training and support.
Mas 60% deles continuam adquirindo treinamento e suporte.
And so they made more money than ever.
Então, eles estão fazendo mais dinheiro do que nunca fizeram.
So you have to come up with a good business plan that makes sense for your solution.
Então, a questão toda é que tu tens que criar um modelo de negócios que faça sentido para a tua solução.
And I will talk more about that on Friday also.
E eu também vou falar um pouco mais sobre isso na sexta-feira. Maddog, I'll just tell the guys that soon after your presentation ends, at the LPI room, we'll just have a series of talks on business model for free and open source software with companies here in Brazil. Eu avisei ao Maddog que depois, assim que termina a palestra dele, a gente vai ter praticamente uma continuação na sala LPI, onde a gente vai ter vários casos de empresas brasileiras, no caso, que do Nordeste ao Sul do Brasil, que têm modelos de negócios bem interessantes baseados em software livre. Okay, let me see if there's some other questions. There's some comments in here. Idiom says that competition is bad, we need to cooperate. That's right, and you actually mentioned that in your presentation. People complaining about the echo. I think it's a lot better now. I noticed that the people controlling in here muting my microphone when I'm not talking. Perdão, pessoal. Eu vi agora que ainda estava com eco, mas eu quero agradecer ao pessoal da organização aqui que está colocando o meu microfone mudo quando eu estou falando. Peço desculpas, Cristiane, Cadunico, um monte de gente que sou apaixonado por essas pessoas aqui. Maddog, there is a question, not actually a question, but Cretiel is mentioned that now we also have Caninus Locus. Would you mind talking a little bit about what is Caninus Locus?
Okay. Caninus Locus started out as a project to simply allow the Raspberry Pi to be produced in Brazil. Are you going to translate that?
Yes, sorry. Caninus Locus é um projeto que basicamente permitia que computadores no estilo do Raspberry Pi fossem produzidos no Brasil.
Because as you know, the Raspberry Pi costs $35 in the United States, but street price is $150 in Brazil.
Porque como vocês sabem, um Raspberry Pi nos Estados Unidos custa $35, mas quando chega no Brasil, o preço de venda chega a $150.
So we spent 2 years working with the Raspberry Pi Foundation to try and manufacture the Raspberry Pi in Brazil.
Então, nós passamos 2 anos conversando com a Fundação Raspberry Pi para tentar ter os computadores Raspberry Pi manufaturados, fabricados aqui no Brasil.
But after 2 years, even though we produced the Raspberry Pis in Brazil, the Raspberry Pi Foundation said no.
Mas mesmo depois de 2 anos, quando nós provamos que a gente poderia produzir os Raspberry Pis no Brasil, a Fundação Raspberry Pi disse não.
So we went and did a deal or an agreement with a company in China.
Então, nós fizemos um acordo com uma empresa na China.
And originally the idea was to simply manufacture that single board computer in Brazil.
E, basicamente, a ideia era simplesmente fabricar aquele computador no Brasil.
But over time, our goals changed.
Mas, ao longo do tempo, os nossos objetivos foram mudando.
Because our goals were not only to produce a good, reasonably priced computer in Brazil,
Porque nosso objetivo, então, não era simplesmente só produzir um computador bom e com preço razoável no Brasil.
but to encourage the design and manufacture and redistribution of little single board computers in Brazil.
Mas também era fazer com que as pessoas considerassem o desenvolvimento e o projeto desses computadores de single board aqui no Brasil.
To increase the expertise of creating that type of electronics in Brazil.
Para aumentar a capacidade intelectual das pessoas para produzirem esse tipo de equipamento eletrônico aqui no Brasil.
Which is a lot harder than just manufacturing these things in Brazil.
O que, é claro, é muito mais difícil do que simplesmente fabricar essas coisas no Brasil.
You have to create what are known as supply chains of getting all the parts necessary to build these in Brazil.
É necessário criar uma cadeia de produção para produzir todos os componentes necessários para essas coisas aqui no Brasil.
If you start to look out into the far future instead of just what you're doing tomorrow,
se vocês começarem a utilizar no futuro distante, ao olhar o futuro distante, ao invés de simplesmente olhar o que vai acontecer amanhã,
then you start thinking about an entire ecosystem of creating these little computers.
Então é possível imaginar todo um ecossistema que inicia com esses microcomputadores.
In addition to that, quite frankly, it's hard to do a lot of things in Brazil.
E eu também devo dizer que, com bastante franqueza, que é muito difícil de fazer certas coisas no Brasil.
So it has taken us some time to do these things, and, you know, we are always hopeful that the next month we'll start to sell these.
Então, a gente continua tentando, a gente continua trabalhando, a gente sempre tem a expectativa de que no próximo mês a gente será capaz de vender essas coisas.
So it is my hope that in the beginning of 2021, we will be able to start selling the Labrador computer and the little Polga sensor computer.
Então, a minha esperança agora é que no começo de 2021 a gente possa efetivamente começar a vender o microcomputador, que é o Labrador, e os sensores chamados pulgas que rodam nesse Labrador.
We have had some success because the Labrador and the Polga were both used in the open source respirator that was developed at the University of São Paulo.
Nós tivemos algum sucesso porque tanto o Labrador quanto os sensores, as pulgas, foram usados num respirador que foi produzido pela Universidade de São Paulo.
So the respirator that was needed for the COVID people in the hospitals, instead of being $15,000 was more like $2,000.
E assim os respiradores necessários para os pacientes hospitalizados em função do COVID, que custava $15.000, pôde custar cerca de $2.000.
And this is what I'm talking about by creating a solution, which is the respirator, instead of just the Labrador or just the Polga.
E é isso que eu quero dizer sobre criar uma solução, nesse caso o respirador, do que simplesmente criar um microcomputador e os seus sensores.
Because at the same time you're reducing the cost of the respirator to make it more affordable, you're increasing the value of the Labrador and the Polga by putting it into this solution.
Porque ao mesmo tempo que tu está baixando o custo de um respirador, tu pode estar aumentando o valor do Labrador e da Pulga ao colocá-los dentro de uma solução como um respirador.
So about 20 years ago, IBM stopped selling laptop computers and small servers.
Cerca de 20 anos atrás, a IBM parou de vender computadores laptop e pequenos servidores.
They sold that business to Lenovo because they realized that they could only get 2 to 3% profit off of that business.
Eles venderam esse negócio então para a Lenovo porque eles perceberam que eles só conseguiam tirar 2 a 3% de lucro desse tipo de negócio.
So Lenovo, which had a much lower overhead on the production of these things,
então a Lenovo, que tinha uma sobrecarga bem menor na produção desse tipo de coisa,
were able to make more profit off of the hardware,
foi capaz de conseguir mais lucro em cima do hardware.
And IBM took the people that had been making that hardware and put them into creating solutions.
E a IBM pegou essas pessoas que antes estavam trabalhando na produção do hardware para criar soluções.
Because the profit of a solution is typically 19 to 20%.
Porque quando a gente fala no lucro acima de uma solução, aí esse lucro sobe para 19 a 20%.
So if you look at it in a rough sense, IBM went from making only 2 to 3% profit on their people to making 19 to 20% profit on their people.
E assim, se pensar de uma maneira crua, a IBM, que fazia 2 a 3% de lucro em cima daquelas pessoas, passou a fazer de 19 a 20% de lucro em cima das mesmas pessoas.
And so this is really my recommendation to people in Brazil who are looking at using free software.
Então, esse é de fato a minha recomendação para as pessoas do Brasil que estão procurando produzir software livre.
Think of a solution which you can create using free software and use free software to reduce the cost of that solution.
Pense na solução que vocês querem criar para oferecer e pensem que o software livre pode reduzir o custo total dessa solução que vocês vão oferecer.
For example, if your solution needs a relational database, like Oracle,
por exemplo, se a sua solução precisa de uma base de dados relacional como Oracle,
by using PostgreSQL or by using MySQL, you can reduce the cost of that solution by the Oracle license.
Você consegue, nesse caso, reduzir, então, o custo da tua solução ao usar softwares livres como PostgreSQL e como MySQL no valor que seria o valor pago pela licença do Oracle.
Which either allows you to lower the price of your solution so you're more competitive against your competitors.
E dessa forma, tu consegue baixar também o custo da tua solução e aí tu pode te tornar mais competitivo perante os teus competidores.
Or you can put more profit into your pocket or distribute that to your employees.
Ou tu podes colocar mais lucro no teu bolso ou distribuir esse lucro entre os teus funcionários.
That's it.
É isso. That's it. Okay, Maddog, let me just check if there's some more questions in here. O Syriaco is asking me and asking us for being here. Lots and lots of thank you. A lot of people saying that they are always enriched by taking your lessons. Well, in 2 to 3 minutes before we close, you are going to be back here on Friday to do your footnote. People are very curious to what can they expect from your footnote. Like, can you give us a teaser?
Yes, I can. You might expect.
Sorry. Eu perguntei para ele se ele podia dar um teaser do que vai ser o footnote dele na sexta-feira do Latinoware. Ele falou que sim. Aqui está o que vocês podem esperar.
You might expect Santa Penguin, although he's hard to put on with the earphones.
Vocês podem esperar o Pinguim Noel, mesmo ele sendo difícil de colocar com os fones de ouvido.
I think what I will be saying on Friday is more detail about how to make money with free software.
Eu acho que o que eu vou falar na sexta-feira vai ser de uma maneira mais detalhada como é que vocês podem ganhar dinheiro com software livre.
And also why it's very important for universities to teach using free software and governments in Latin America to use free software.
E eu também vou falar da razão, da importância pela qual as universidades devem se preocupar em ensinar software livre e os governos devem se preocupar por que investir em software livre.
So make sure that your managers and your political people and stuff listen to this.
Então, por favor, garantam que seus gerentes e os seus políticos venham assistir a minha palestra.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Maddog. Always a pleasure. I'll be moving into the LPI room. The event is full of things for people to do here from now on and for the next 2 days. Eu falei para o Maddog que agora eu estou saindo daqui, estou indo para a sala do LPI, onde a gente vai ter todo o resto do dia sobre modelos de negócios, mas tem uma série de coisas fantásticas para vocês fazerem aí no Latinoware. Então, por favor, aproveitem bastante o evento e obrigado a todos. Bye, bye, boss.
Bye. Take care.